So welcome everybody to our talk tonight. I'm Michael Dalton, bioenergy practitioner and trainer. I've been practicing bioenergy healing for over 30 years. And it's my pleasure to share with you. Our talk tonight is called Jumping Timelines. And what might that be, you might wonder, or else you might know a little bit about timelines. But I thought we'd break it down a little bit tonight and I give you some insight into the way that we work with bioenergy and how I often see how people shift from one timeline to another, and I'll give you some insight into that and how you might be able to use it in your own life to better your life, to make things better. So the first kind of question I posed for our talk tonight, it was, which timeline are you on? And there's a kind of like, you could say that there's the collective timeline. So there's a collective timeline that we're all on. And then of course we're individual. So there's individual timelines that we're on. And what you could say is what's meant by a timeline is really the path or destination route that you're on. So if you're driving to Calgary, there's a path ahead of you and you're going on that path. Then there could be different ways to get there. You could take the scenic route, you could take the highway route, you could take the route with construction. So it's like the three paths could still lead you to your destination, but they could bring you, in different ways. One is like a faster way, one is a more scenic way, one is, full of hassle and construction. So you can still get to the same place, but it can be a very different journey based on which energy frequency or indeed vibration that you're tuning into. And then at the same time, we could also change our destination. So we could even end up not going to, if we're driving to Calgary, not going there and driving somewhere else. So there's the collective timeline in which we're moving to almost like a location. So collectively we're moving to a location, or we're moving to a place. And then there's also our individual timelines, as we said. So one of the things that I like to share, like in my training, is this is a kind of I think a good way to understand almost like the personal timeline, right? So in cases of multiple personalities, where people have more than one personality, it's not uncommon that they can be a diabetic in one personality and not be a diabetic in another personality. Now, when you think of that, that's pretty crazy stuff, isn't it? Like that a person could be a diabetic, need an insulin, problems with their pancreas, and in one personality, they need insulin, they have problems with their pancreas. And in a moment of a second, they switch to a different personality and they no longer need insulin. They're no longer a diabetic. So it's like they're jumping from one personality into another personality. They're jumping from one state into another state. And it's more than that. It's a quantum jump, which means that their body on a cellular level is jumping from one place where the energy is flowing in, communicating to all the organs, tissue, cells, blood, bones, and is saying, you are this person with diabetes. And then in another personality, the energy comes in and in a fraction of a second rewires itself, goes through a different looping system, and they no longer have diabetes. And that's pretty fantastic, to think about, just to think about that, like that people have that human potential to be a diabetic in one moment and not be a diabetic in another. Now, it doesn't mean that you want to split your personality, maybe you're doing that already, who knows, who am I to say, but it's like, understanding like that the human being has this potential to jump from one way of being to jump into another way of being. And I've often seen this, like treating people over like 30 years of bioenergy practice with clinics, treating thousands of people. You see people, who've been sick for 10, 20, 30 years. And I mean, I've seen people who've been sick for 45 years. That's a long time to be ill and sick. That's older than most of the people here, right? So you're welcome. But, to be sick for 45 years, there's a like a timeline that you're on, where your thoughts, your feelings, your body are all feeding into that illness and sickness. And unless something like radical happens, really nothing's going to really change, right? You might go to more therapists, more doctors, have more pills, but you're really still going to end up with the same conditions, the same stuff, unless something really jumps, that you jump out of that and you jump into a new place. And so one of the things that I've seen is like that, you can observe people going on a particular path. And if they keep doing what they've always done, they're going to keep getting what they've always gotten, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. I mean, we all do it. We don't know that we do it, but we all do it to some degree. We keep doing the same things and we expect something different is going to happen. In fact, some people even say to me, well, if I just do more physio, then maybe it will work. And I say, well, how long are you doing the physio? And they're like, 4 years, or someone will say, well, if I just do more counseling, maybe it'll work. I'm like, how long are you doing the counseling? They're like 8 years. Someone will be like, maybe if I do more chiropractic work. I'm like, how long are you doing it? They're like 10 years. 10 years of going to the chiropractor. At some point, you got to realize maybe it's not working. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but if you're doing something for 10 years, you might need to face the fact that if I do it for another 10 years, I'm probably not going to have much difference, right? Like if it hasn't worked in the first 10 years, it's probably unlikely that it's going to suddenly work in the next 10 years. I even think at times, like if you're going to anybody for treatment for like even a year, like there's nowhere in the mind of the practitioner where you're suddenly going to get better. If you've been going to someone for a year or 2 years or 4 years, they're not shifting into a timeline where they see you healthy and well. They can't. They've been now conditioned by the fact that you've been going to them for a couple of years. They're conditioned to keep seeing you in the same way, right? Like that's just how we are as beings. So I always think like, the window when someone comes to visit me, that's really the window. That's the window where anything can happen because they don't know you, you don't know them, and it's a field of possibility. But the longer you go to see someone, that field of infinite possibility reduces itself into some probabilities. Right? So the probability of me going to someone for treatment for 4 years, the probability of me suddenly getting better is very much reduced. Does that make sense? Right? But if I'm going to a new practitioner that I've never met before, I'm in that field of infinite possibility, and there's at least a probability that something new can happen. Something new can happen that hasn't happened before. Why? Because I'm still in that field of possibility, which is open to the probability. But the longer I'm in a certain path, the possibilities get reduced and they become a probability. And in quantum physics, you can see this as the wave and the particle. So a wave is, you can say like an electron can be a wave or a particle. And as a wave, it's just pure potential to become anything. But the more we focus on something, then the possibilities are reduced into the probability. So then when the wave becomes a particle, then that has reduced itself into a singularity, into a single possibility. So out of all the possibilities, now there's a single possibility. So in terms of like relating this back to illness and sickness, sometimes we have perceptions of ourselves, and those perceptions are, oh, I'm this person with migraine, or I'm this person with arthritis, or I'm this person with back pain. And because of that, like seeing yourself as that person or that way, the more we perceive ourselves as that, then the probability of it staying that way becomes more and more and more as we start to then, it's almost like we see ourselves as the person with back pain, arthritis, and then the reflection of that is reflected back to us. It almost like loops back around. And now you have your thoughts, which are your electrical field of the body. And then you have your feelings, which are the magnetic field of the body. So we have our electromagnetic field, which is the thought and emotional field around the body. And as you think, you release electrical chemicals throughout your body. And as you feel, you release feelings out, like a magnetic field out around your body. And then the magnetic feeling pulls back to you evidence to support your experience. So this is kind of one way in which we move through life, creating and drawing to us evidence to confirm our own belief back to us. So now, if you're having a thought that, you know, I'm this person with back pain, I've been having treatment, I can't get better, that thought that you can't get better obviously brings up a feeling of resistance to, well, I want to get better, but I tried different things and nothing has worked. So a common thing that people come in when they come in for treatment, they'll often say, I've tried everything and nothing works, you know. Well, you haven't tried everything, right? Like you've tried some things, you know, but if you're in a loop that says, I've tried things and nothing works, then you're going to keep experiencing that same loop. Like emotionally, we maintain the same vibration, right? So we're vibrationally experiencing the same experiencing, looping it back around to ourselves, and then expecting a different result. And so that's again the definition of insanity. We literally have to jump out of the person that we are and become a different person. We have to jump out of the person who's sick and become the person who's healthy. So part of how we kind of process timelines and bioenergy is there's three parts to bioenergy healing. The first part is your intent. The second part is your breathing, and the third part is the bioenergy techniques. And what intent does is it's directing your mind, it's taking all of the possibilities and it's directing your mind to the probability that you want, right? So what's the probability that you want? Well, in terms of health, it's to be healthy, right? So now you start to loop into the probability where you see yourself healthy and well. And that's one of the things that I always stress to people, right? See yourself healthy and well. Because it doesn't matter if other people see you as unhealthy. It doesn't matter if doctors say to you, you're not going to get better. What's more important, what affects your vibrational frequency more than anything else is what you say to yourself. Boom, right? You know, fireworks, there's fireworks in Vancouver tonight, but this is another type of fireworks, right? This is like what you say to yourself. You have 70 trillion cells in your body listening. They're listening, right? And so let's quantum jump back to the person with multiple personalities. With that person with the multiple personalities, when they jump to the personality that has diabetes, they literally rewire their electromagnetic system of the body, the chemical system, the biology of their body. They literally cause a mutation in their biology where they become that person with the illness and sickness. And then when they jump personalities again, and we're talking about a fraction of a second. We're talking about bang, faster than a firework, right? It's happened, and then you hear the sound later. It's like literally the person jumps out of that personality and they jump into a different personality. So often when I'm like working with people and you have someone standing in front of you and they've been sick for 30 years, right? That's a long time. I've been practicing bioenergy for 30 years, but there's people who come to me and they've been sick for 30 years. I mean, it sounds crazy that someone can be sick that long, right? And, if somebody is sick that long, you can imagine that their mind, their identity, their personality is very much in a very particular timeline, a timeline that regardless of whatever hopes or dreams they've had, if they continue doing what they're doing, it's very unlikely that they're suddenly going to get better, right? Like when people keep doing what they've always done, if you keep doing what you've done for the last 30 years, it's unlikely that you're suddenly going to get better. So something has to shift. Something has to change, and one of the things that I like 30 years after bioenergy, I'm still pretty passionate about it. And I think like what makes me passionate about it is that when a person comes in, and even though they've been sick for 30 years, and even though they told me they've tried everything, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you haven't tried bioenergy. You haven't tried this. And it's like, they'll be like, well, how do you know I haven't tried it? And I'm like, well, because you're still sick, right? Because you still have the same problems. That's why you haven't tried it, because it works. And it's not a belief. I don't have a belief that bioenergy works. It's a knowing, right? Like it's a knowing. And I know that when people, like the basis of healing, and specifically bioenergy healing, is that the reason people get sick is because when the electrical field and the magnetic field gets clogged up, it reduces the flow of electromagnetic energy flowing through the body. Now, whether we want to call that stress or any other name, when we're under stress, trauma, injury, accidents, it closes down the electromagnetic field of the body. It clogs up the electromagnetic field. Sometimes our electrical, the thought process, people say like they think too much or they think really negative, or, obviously not anybody here, but there's a lot of people out there that say like they think very negative, or they think too much, or they have a lot of fear in their thinking. Well, if you have a lot of fear in your thinking, you can imagine that fear, right, which is going to be an emotion, is going to loop you back around. Now, one of the lessons in just level 1 bioenergy is what you focus on expands, right? Now, if you're without wanting to, but if you're focused on fear, and by focus on fear, meaning that fear is kind of coming up for you a lot, and you're fearful of things, you're in a fear vibration. So when you're in a fear vibration, that fear is going to loop itself. It's going to keep looping itself back around, So now you have someone who's been sick for 30 years, and they pretty much might have a fear that they're not going to get better. Now, even though they're coming for treatment, they're fearful that they're not going to get better. And they even like lead with their fear, right? I've tried everything and nothing works. Well, that's fear-based, right? Like I've tried everything, nothing works. Of course they're disheartened, right? They've gone for treatments, they've paid money, they've trusted people, and they still haven't got better. So it's not uncommon for people to be in that fear mode when it comes to their illness or sickness. Also, as people get older, more fear comes up around your health or lack of health, and it's like we got to get out of that fear mode, because that fear mode keeps us in illness and sickness, and even creates more illness and sickness. So the more we're looping back into fear, so you're worried about your illness, you're worried about your sickness, and literally the fear of that, like, not only maintains and sustains your illness, but it can even add more illness, more sickness to it. So that's one of the things that I've noticed, is that, you know, needing to help people get off that like timeline, that direction that they're going in, because I don't need to follow people into their future to know what's going to happen. And it's not because I'm psychic. It's just because you can look at a person's past and you can look at the direction that they're going in, and you can look at what they're doing. And if they keep doing what they've been doing, they're going to keep getting what they've previously gotten, right? It makes sense, right? Like, it's just logical thinking, right? Like, a logical thinking just tells you, if we stay on the same timeline, we keep moving into the same place, but maybe with more problems, right? So now we got to get off the problem train. We got to get off the problem timeline. And so I posed the question, are you on a healing timeline? You know, so some people will come and they'll say to me, yeah, Michael, I've been doing healing. I'm working on myself. And I'm like, well, how long have you been working on yourself and doing the healing for yourself? And they're like, 10 years, you know? And again, I'm thinking, well, something's not working, right? Because when healing happens, like, it happens, right? It's not an idea. It's experiential, right? So if you're actually healing, if you're healing, you become healed, you get better. But if you're still healing, you know, and 10 years go by and you're still healing, maybe you're not healing, you know? And I know that sounds a bit rough, but, you know, like, after 30 years of working with thousands of people, I think I have a right to say that, right? Like, I have a right to kind of call people on the bullshit card, right? Like, the bullshit timeline, like, doing more of what doesn't work doesn't make it work, right? It doesn't. It just doesn't, right? So now, what do we do different? Well, you know, one of the ways that I feel that helps people shift or move or transform or change is that, first, understanding that your thoughts and your feelings can be clogging up your system. And that's not, I'm going to again say, that's not a belief. That's a friggin' reality, right? When your thinking and your feelings affect your body. And as much as science and medicine will say, no, your body's a chemical system and your thoughts and feelings don't affect your body, that's a really old paradigm. It's well established now. I think people can well accept that, you know, we are thinking, feeling beings, right? Like, you know, if you have something, a trauma that's happened, and you don't release that, that's going to become illness and sickness in your body. That's not something I'm making up. That's reality, right? Like, if you have repressed emotions in your body, it becomes illness and sickness. If you're in a job that you hate and every day you're going to that job and you hate it, you know, like, literally one day you're going to go into that job and instead of punching in the punch card, your heart is going to punch out. You know, more people die of heart attacks at 9 o'clock on Monday morning than any other time of the week, right? How does your heart know it's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning? Well, because that's typically when people clock in for work, right? Like, in I don't know if people still use those clock in machines, but in the past it was pretty common, right? You clock in, you stamp a card that says you're at work, and then when you leave, you stamp the card again to say that you're leaving, and then they pay you based on how many hours you were there. So in terms of clocking in, like, I would say, like, animals don't generally have heart attacks at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. I mean, I don't know for certain. I can't tell you that for certain, but I'm pretty sure that they don't have the same relationship to time that we have, right? they're definitely more present. They live more in the present. Whereas we tend to base everything on time, right? Everything moves in waves, rhythm, patterns, cycles. We have our 24-hour day. We have our morning, afternoon, and evening. So we tend to kind of move in cycles. We also have seasons, right? So spring, summer, autumn, winter, we have our seasons that we move through. So we tend to move as human beings, we tend to move in cycles. And so then you can see how when people really are doing things that they don't want to be doing, like maybe a job that they don't like, and they keep clocking in for that job, one day they clock out, you know, and it's the heart just like, I don't want to do it anymore. And the heart clocks out, you know. So when I look at people's, like, their health, I always think, like, when people get sick, it's not random. You don't suddenly just get sick, right? There's a possibility where you can be healthy, and there's a possibility where you can get sick. Both possibilities exist, right? Now, if you're doing a job that you don't want to do, the probability of you staying healthy becomes less and less the more you do that job. Does that make sense? If you're in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, the longer you're in that, the chances of staying healthy, the probability becomes less and less and less, right? So now all the possibilities are reducing into the probability. And so on one level, you could say that there's multiple timelines. There's multiple different possibilities for you as an individual to exist, right? There's the collective probabilities, but there's also individual probabilities. So we're all in this, we'll say we're in this life together, but not everybody is healthy and not everybody is sick. Not everybody is wealthy and not everybody is poor. Not everybody has food to eat and not everybody is hungry. So there's lots of probabilities and possibilities within the same spectrum. Does that make sense? And there's everything in between, right? So now you have someone who's coming in and they've been sick for a period of time. And like I said, they're on that probability time. They're on that, out of the field of infinite possibilities, they have now become a probability where they're sick, and the probability of them getting better gets less and less, you know, with time. We'll say it that way. And then you say, well, why are they sick in the first place? So why do people get sick? And you begin to notice that, like, you're not sick because you're going to work. I think that work is actually really good for us, right? We need to be busy. We need to be doing stuff, right? If you don't need to love your work, absolutely. Like, I love my work, but you don't have to love your work to be healthy. You know, it's called work, right? You know, it's not called pleasure. I'm going to pleasure today, you know, but it's called work. I'm going to work. I'm going to do work, right? Like, you have to work. You have to participate. You have to do something. What I've experienced is, I don't see people getting sick because they go to work. I see people getting sick because they're going to work that they hate, that they don't enjoy. You know, I would even go so far to say that you don't even have to love your work, but you should like it. Does that make sense? You should like it. You should like the people that you're working with. You don't have to love them. You don't have to be best friends with them. You could hang out with them when you're in work and not see them for the rest of the, you know, not see them over the weekend, not see them in the evenings. You don't have to be best friends with them. But if you don't want to be around them, that's gonna affect your electromagnetic field, because it's going to affect how you think, and it's going to affect how you feel. And how you're thinking and feeling affects how your physical body is responding. And how you're thinking and feeling is affecting also how the universe is responding to you. Because you're a vibrational frequency. you are a broadcast and you're always broadcasting. And so the people, the environment that you surround yourself in could be uplifting you or lowering you, right? So if you're in a fear loop, you might be, I think one of the worst things that people can do is to tune into the news, right? It's total fear porn, fear mongering, you know, just saying, right? But when we loop into like, you know, it's not that you can get rid of all the negative people in your life. I always say this on my courses, right? It's like, it's not about getting rid of the negative people, right? There'd be no one left, right? You know, we all have our bad days, right? There'd be nobody left. If you get rid of all the negative people, you'll have no family, you'll have no friends, you'll have no neighbors, you'll have no one, right? So it's not about that. It's not black and white. But in terms of like, if you're around people that are always negative, that are always fearful, if you get out of their life, they'll find other people to be fearful and negative with, right? You don't have to worry about them. They'll find other people because they'll loop around with those people. But we have to come back and take some self-responsibility of like, look, if I'm around negative people all the time, then maybe I'm one of them. Right? Maybe I'm the one that's looping around. Maybe I'm the one that's in that low energy, low frequency, low vibration. And I think one of the things that people often don't see is that people don't see their own stuff. We often say that people have a blind spot about their own stuff. So they don't see when they're being negative. They don't see when they're in a negative frequency. They don't see when they're looping back into the same fearful timeline over and over, you know. So there's always going to be evidence outside of you to support you in whatever you believe, right? So if you believe that you can't get better from an illness, the way on, I forget what it was called, but there was like a Netflix episode, and it was about the algorithms of like social media. And does anybody remember that movie? It was a kind of like, basically when you're on social media, whatever you're looking up or whatever you're watching, the algorithm in the social media will send you more of the same. So like, it's really crazy. Like it's observing what you're doing and sending you looping more of the exact same stuff back to you. So now this is kind of a little bit crazy, right? Because whatever you believe in or whatever you are interested in, like if you're on social media, you're going to keep seeing more of exactly the same stuff. You're going to see less of the opposite opinion. You're going to see less of an opposing opinion, and you're going to see more of what you agree with. And that's the algorithm of social media. It's pretty kind of crazy, right? Because you start to loop then into the same kind of perceptions over and over. So if you believe in a particular like politics or a particular medical thing or particular like how things work, you're going to keep seeing more and more evidence of the same stuff. But then, like in a way, that doesn't just happen with social media. That happens with life itself. That happens with life itself has algorithms built into it. What does that mean? Well, your thoughts and your feelings create vibrations, and those vibrations are broadcasts, and they're broadcasting out. And have you ever had that situation where you're thinking something or you're feeling something, and then someone says it to you? Someone says like the exact thing that you're thinking, right? So you don't need to be on your phone to get a feedback loop about what you're thinking and feeling. You know, you could even have this like random idea, I want to go to Hawaii, right? And then someone like that, you talk to someone on the phone that day and they just say, hey, I just got back from Hawaii. And you're like, wow, how am I talking to you today? And the fact that you brought up that you're in Hawaii, and the fact that I was just thinking Hawaii, it's like it's all looping back around because it's a frequency. It's like in computer code, it's all ones and zeros, right? It's just ones and zeros, right? So it's all going out, vibrating out into the world and then looping back to us. So this is where, like, when I look at healing, I really look at it from this perspective of there's all these different possibilities, but people keep looping back around to the same probabilities. And the more they loop around to the same probabilities, the more likely they are to keep getting the same outcome. Boom, right? Boom, right there. That's your golden nugget for tonight. Not to be confused with a chicken nugget, equally good. But we keep looping it back around to the same stuff. So in terms of like, well, what do I do to shift timelines, or what do I do to shift energy for someone who's been sick for 20 or 30 years? Well, for, most of you, I think, here who've done bioenergy, you'll know like the bioenergy practice is all based around one technique: gather up the energy, draw out the energy, release the blocked energy. And so the practice of bioenergy is about getting the blockages out of the body. What are the blockages? Well, when we have stress builds up in the body, whether it's mental blockages or emotional blockages, whether it's accidents, injuries, trauma, like whether it's physical or emotional or mental, it's literally all the same thing. It's all the same thing. People really say, like, people are like, oh, it's mental or it's emotional or it's physical. It's all vibrational. It's all the same thing. And when it's in the mental, it eventually sinks itself and lowers its vibration and comes into the emotional. And when it's left unclogged, if it stays blocked in the emotional, then it lowers itself, it becomes denser and becomes physical. So I've always seen that it's not that suddenly someone gets sick. It's that when you look at a person's life, that you'll see that over time, that the stress of how they're living has begun to become illness and sickness. So you can kind of sum this up in a sense of like, when people have problems with their shoulders, they feel burdened. They feel like they're carrying, we even say it, don't we? I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. When people have lower back pain, they feel unsupported, right? They feel they got to do it all on their own. When people have eye problems, there might be things that they don't want to look at. There's things that they don't want to see, And the longer that goes on, that they don't want to look at those things, they don't want to see those things, it's only a matter of time before their eyes get strained by that. And then what does that mean? Well, people start to lose their eyesight, And that happens with the ears too, right? Like if there's things that you don't want to listen to, you're trying to close off, you don't want to listen to that, you don't want to hear it, you close down your hearing, I always say, like, people know of the condition tinnitus, which is like ringing in the ears. And I think of like kids, when a kid doesn't want to listen, they put their hands over their ears. And if you keep talking to a kid and they don't want to listen to you, they start humming, Well, adults don't cover their ears and hum, but they get tinnitus, they get ringing in their ears. Sorry, I can't hear you. I have ringing in my ears, And so it's like you're drowning out. I don't want to listen to that. So you're drowning it out, Now, maybe you don't want to listen to it. Maybe you're with a partner who's very critical and they keep criticizing you. Maybe that's even a parent, You could be 50 years of age and have a 75-year-old mother or father who is criticizing you all the time. That's not as uncommon as you would think. But it's like, that criticism, after a while, you don't want to hear that anymore. You don't want to listen to that anymore. And so you start to, like, you wonder, well, why am I losing my hearing? But when you look at like what's happening in your life, there's things that are wanting to close down, right? We're not on that timeline of opening up and flowing. We're on a timeline of wanting to close down and not listen. And if we keep going on that same timeline, it's only a matter of time before we lose our hearing. So whether we lose our eyesight, we lose our hearing, we lose mobility in our body. So like there's different energy points in the body, different chakras. So like the root chakra tends to relate more to fear. Now, so when we have problems with fear, that might show up more like in the bones, problems with the bones. We might have more problems with the skeletal system. We might have more problems with the skin, and then the sacral chakra, the next energy point up in the body, that kind of relates a bit more to guilt. So now when we have problems with the sacral chakra with guilt, that's going to show up more in the things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, so your bowels, your urinary tract, the flow and movement and the circulation of fluids in your body, you might end up having more problems in that area. And then another energy point as we come up will be like the solar plexus. That's the fire center, but it's also where we store like shame or anger. And so when people get things like ulcers, it's often associated back to the solar plexus chakra, the fire center, right? So there's the too much fire could mean that a person is like they're angry at stuff, right? They haven't discharged that anger. The anger is still inside them. And if it's left untreated, it becomes something like an ulcer, and it's burning away at them on the inside, right? If you think about an ulcer is burning away at the person on the inside. So it's the fire energy, right? So what is healing? Healing is really coming back and looking at the body and saying what's causing the body to come out of alignment. What is causing the body to have this anger, to have this guilt or this fear, or why are you looping around that? Because some of the stuff that's happened to us is from childhood. That could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. So why are we still looping around to a trauma that happened 40 years ago, right? And it's because it's never been released from the body. We've never gotten off that path. We've never gotten off that track. So we literally have to jump to a new place. We have to come to a new place that we haven't been before. Because if we don't, the destiny, which is the destination that we're heading for, you don't need to be psychic to know where you're going to end up. If you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to end up where you've been going, right? You're going to end up there. So now we want to jump out of illness and sickness, and we want to jump over to health. And I always say, like, it does, like, in fairness, it begins in the mind, right? But it's not just a case of like you thinking positive. Like if it was just a case that we all thought positive, it'd be wonderful, right? I mean, there's a million books on positive thinking, right? I don't think we need any more. There's some, I like to call them shelf help books, because they end up on your shelf, right? That's what they're good for. But they're nice, right? Like positive thinking books are wonderful, right? It's better than a negative thinking book, right? Like positive thinking. But in terms of like, we got to unclog ourselves and get this crap out of the head. We got to unclog ourselves from the emotions and get that out of there. But it's not just purely changing our thought process. It's about releasing the buildup of energy, because the buildup of energy is weighing us down and looping us back into the past. And that right there is what I've kind of seen over years and years of doing thousands of sessions, is that when people are sick for a long time, that they're looping back into the same timeline, which is the past timeline going forward. So now we want to jump from a timeline where we're sick or potentially going to stay sick or get worse, and we want to jump to a timeline where there's also a timeline that exists where you're healthy. There's a timeline that exists where even if you're sick now, you could be completely healthy in the future. That possibility exists, right? Now, if you keep doing what you're always done, the probability of you getting to that new timeline is reduced, even though the probability is reduced, the possibility is still there. And the reason the possibility is still there is because we, in every single moment, exist in the field of infinite possibilities. We're electromagnetic beings jumping in and out of different timelines, whether we realize it or not. But it's just to be able to stay, not only to jump into a healthy timeline, but to be able to stay in it. How do we stay in a timeline where not only do you get healthy, but you stay healthy? Oh, that's the good stuff, right? So you could have someone, you could imagine this, right? You have someone who is sick, they start getting better, they're improving. And maybe even though they're improving, they're getting better. At the same time, they go to the hospital, they get a test done, and the doctor says, oh yeah, your blood says this is wrong. And we'll just say that's a snapshot of your health, right? And that's how your health is in that moment, right? In that particular moment, that's how your health is. Like a photograph. It's like a photograph of the ocean. When you get a test or a diagnosis or a report about your health, it's an image of your health. But you're so much more than that image of your health. You're so much more than an idea or a thought. You are this field of infinite possibility. And bringing yourself back to a diagnosis is like taking a photograph of the ocean and saying that the photograph is the ocean. Nothing could be further from the truth. You're this vast ocean of possibilities. And I think that's what, when I'm working with people, it's like, I'm not going to say all of this to the person. I'm not going to say, hey, you're a vast ocean of possibilities. But I'm going to, it's a knowing, right? It's not something I believe. It's just a knowing. I know it. I know it to be true. And on some level, that knowing is a tuning fork. Boom. You've heard me speak about the tuning fork. That's what the tuning fork is. A tuning fork is a vibration. And when you hit the tuning fork, it vibrates and it brings the other things in its surrounding into the same frequency. People, there's nothing more electrical than ourselves as human beings. We are electrical beings, right? Electromagnetic beings. And each one of us is a tuning fork. And we tune to the vibration that we either believe or that we know. I like to say that it's so much better to tune to your knowing, your intuitive knowing, than it is to tune to your beliefs. Because if you think it, not even the things that you believe, beliefs aren't forever, right? Like you might believe something and then a year later you don't believe it anymore. So beliefs change. So they're not truth. Beliefs are not truth, right? I mean, even if you believe something, the very nature of belief is that maybe even you're trying to convince yourself of something, right? So it's not so much that you believe that you can get better, right? Because to believe that you can get better also makes you think that you may not get better. So I like to think of it as, okay, there's a timeline where you're completely healthy and well. And you got to tune into that energy. You got to find that frequency and tune into that frequency. And when you see it and feel it in your body as a frequency, when you tune into that frequency, it's just like love. Love isn't a concept. It's not an idea, right? Like love is an experience, right? You know, like a sunset, right? Like, you know, it's very hard to describe a sunset. It's an experience, right? Love is an experience. Health is an experience. And so we must shift ourselves to that experience where we can actually see ourselves healthy and well. And that's the power of your mind to create, you know. And so the process of bioenergy, like, what is that process? It's really clearing the blocks out of the way, clearing the clogged energy, the blockages out, the mental blockages, the emotional blockages, clearing them out long enough until the energy is flowing freely through the body. And even when the energy gets flowing freely, it's not uncommon that a person's going to try to block themselves up again. Why? Because that's their norm, right? And so you got to keep the energy system flowing freely long enough for the person to experience health. And as they start to experience health, it becomes the new vibration, you know. And it's not, I always think of bioenergy, I always say to people, like, you know, do 5 sessions. It's not like do 5 years of treatment, you know, it's do 5 sessions. You know, at the very most do 10 sessions, but it doesn't mean it's 10 years of treatment. It's like 10 sessions. Most people do that with the chiropractor, you know, they do that with massage. They might do, you know, 10 sessions a year for 10 years, you know. It's not something that you have to do all the time. You just have to do it. You have to do something different than what you've been doing, something that changes the electromagnetic field of the body, and something that changes it long enough for you to experience health and well-being. And then something that holds it long enough for you now to take on that new vibration, for you to become that new vibration, you know. So in terms of bioenergy, I already think of people as there's a future possibility where the person's already healthy, right? All I'm doing is helping the person tune into that frequency. I'm not making them healthy. I'm simply taking away the blocks that's looping them into the timeline where they're staying sick. And if I take the blocks away, then they, because of their vibration will loop them into a new timeline, a timeline where they're healthy. Boom, right? It's fireworks tonight, folks. So in essence, the universe is responding to us, right? The universe is responding to our energy, our frequency, our vibration, you know. And this goes in so many ways. Like, I often think of a woman I was treating, and she, while I was treating her, she also mentioned that she had a house that she was trying to sell. And I said, well, how long have you been trying to sell the house? And she's like, for 2 years. And I said, that's a long time to be trying to sell a house. I said, do you have a realtor? And she said, oh, I have 2 realtors. I'm like, what? And so she's had 2 realtors and she wasn't able to sell the house. And so, you know, as I was working on her, I noticed there was a block in her sacral chakra. And the sacral chakra is our emotional center. And it's the emotional center that's below the heart chakra. And any of the energy points below the chakra, below the heart, are unconscious. And any of the chakras above the heart are conscious. So when we have problems going on in the upper chakras, we tend to know what those problems are. But when we have problems in the lower chakras, we tend not to know what they are because they're in the unconscious region of the body, right? So I was like opening up her energy system, identifying where the energy was flowing and blocked, and the energy was blocked in her sacral. And that would be definitely an indication if the energy is not flowing in the sacral, then sometimes things won't be flowing in your life. It's like there's a real connection between Is your energy flowing here? This is the flowing center. Because if it's not flowing, then like the biggest thing that happens when your energy is not flowing in your sacral, you feel stuck. And so she felt stuck with this house, you know. And so as we started clearing the energy from there, you know, and started releasing the energy from the sacral, she started crying and she started releasing. And what she was releasing was her mother had died and her mother had given her the house. And she hadn't released the emotion from her mother's passing. Right? Do you see where this is going? Do you see why the house didn't sell? Despite there was 2 realtors, why they couldn't sell the house? Because energetically, she wasn't ready to let go of the house because the house represented her mother. And then when she released, when she had that emotional release, she hadn't even finished her sessions and she had 2 offers on her house and the house sold. And, you know, a course of treatment is only like 4 sessions over 4 weeks and a follow-up a month later. So it wasn't even 2 months. She had 2 offers on the house and the house sold. But more than that, like that's a kind of like, that's the effect of getting your energy flowing. So she's on a timeline where the house is not selling. And then after treatment, she moved to a timeline where the house was selling. But we still had to do the work in between. What was the work? To release the grief over her mother, to relieve the, now, grief is normally held in the heart chakra, right? So this is the energy point that we work for grief. But when we suppress things down in the body, we push them down lower. So we push them down into the very lower chakras. And so then we don't even know that we have it. So like if I said to her, you know, this is over, you know, have you like grieved your mom? Like she wouldn't be aware of the fact that she hadn't because it's suppressed, you know. So it's only when she released it that she realized that she hadn't released it, right? So it's only when people release stuff that then they realize that they hadn't released it. Does that make sense? Right? Well, here we are, 8 o'clock, boom, an hour has flown by. Yeah, that's kind of like my take on timelines. I feel like that there's an infinite number of timelines. There's timelines where you can be healthy and well, happy, in loving relationships, in a job that you love, abundance, prosperity. There's all different potential timelines. What stops us moving into those timelines is we're holding on to the past. The best way to release the past that I've experienced is clearing that out of the energy system, because it's held at a level at which we often can't access by ourselves. And so what bioenergy healing is doing is coming into your energy field and clearing out the clogged energy, the blocked energy. It's freeing up your energy. It's opening up your energy. It's not specifically putting you onto a different timeline. It's what happens is when you come into alignment, you come into your highest vibration. So when you come into your joy, when you come into love, when you come into happiness, when you come into peace, you start to line up with your highest timeline. And then you move out of the construction route and you move over to the beautiful scenic route, the route in which everything just flows. It's easy, it's effortless. You know, you don't have to push and force. It's the magnetism is drawing things to you, right? So when your energy is clear, your magnetism is turned on, you're attracting, you're creating, you're manifesting. When your magnetism is clogged up, you're pushing and forcing and trying really hard and not getting anywhere. You're stuck, you're not in the flow, right? So in those moments where you're in the flow, you'll notice that it's like, it feels more effortless. It feels easier. It feels in alignment. So for me, that's also part of what healing is. It's helping people get out of their own way. It's not putting them onto a new timeline. It's putting them into their highest vibrational frequency, their highest energy. So when we come into our highest energy, which as an example, on the David Hawkins scale of consciousness, fear vibrates at 100 and love vibrates at 500, right? So now imagine the difference, right? If you're having healing and you come out of your healing and you're vibrating in a love frequency, that's very different than if you're vibrating in a fear frequency. And if you're watching, you know, the news and you're surrounding yourself with people in a low vibration, it's very hard to get yourself out of that vibration. You got to do something different than what you've been doing, you know. And so for me, it's always like, even though someone has been sick for 20, 30 years, I feel like when people come in for sessions, that they're open to the possibility that something new can happen, that they haven't closed down all the possibilities, that even though they've tried everything and nothing has worked, there's still something inside them that says, there's a possibility here where I can get better. And it's to that place inside of you that I'm speaking to the place inside of you that there's a knowing, not a belief, but there's a knowing inside of you that knows that you're so much more than what you're expressing. And that's the part of you that I speak to. And that's the part of you in sessions and training that I'm reaching that part of you, waking that part of you, opening up that part of you so that you step into the fullness of who you are. And as you step into that vibration, then that vibration affects which timeline you're in. So the highest vibration that you're in within yourself, that's your growth. That's like in bioenergy, we say that's your practice. Your only practice is to be in your highest vibration, to return to love, to get everything out of your system that is clogging itself up. You know, and we all need help. You know, it's great if you can do it by yourself. And if you can, absolutely amazing. But if you need help, if you need support, this is the work. This is what we do. This is bioenergy. It looks a bit crazy. We're waving our hands around your body. But when you understand that it's an electromagnetic field, and when that electromagnetic field is flowing freely, you are healthy. And when that electromagnetic field is clogged up, you get sick. And once you realize that, then doing all the physical work, taking all the pills and drugs, they're all working on the effect. They're not getting to the cause. The energy is the cause. Everything is energy, my friends. Everything is energy. And that's why, like 30 years later, I'm so passionate about it, because when you realize that everything is energy, that's where you need to put the work in. And if you've been doing it for 30 years and it hasn't been working, maybe you've been working in the wrong timeline, in the wrong place, in the wrong vibration, you know. So when you start to shift and you start to do the energy work, like, it's not something you have to do for a long time. When it works quickly, right? So in terms of, for those who are on the Zoom, I've posted my link tree here. You can check out, I have sessions, I have training. Please tune in for, if you haven't had a session, at least try one session, just experience it. I do sessions in person in Vancouver, as well as sessions online. And then tomorrow, Thursday, I have a healing evening in Vancouver for anyone who might be interested in that. And then that's a group healing and breathing and bioenergy. And then every few months, I do a level 1 bioenergy training. So our next level 1 bioenergy training is coming up in October 14th and 15th. And that's a beautiful 2-day workshop at the Stretch Place in Kitsilano. And it's a beautiful 2-day workshop where you're learning healing for yourself. You're putting healing back in your hands. You're learning the bioenergy healing techniques. You're learning how to unclog the energy system. And my goal is to get bioenergy into everybody's hands, you know, to bring it back to nature, back to the natural. Energy healing is the most natural thing that we can do, and it's about putting healing back in people's own hands, for their own family, you know, for their own children, for their own friends. You know, bring it back in, bring healing back into your hands. Especially in these last couple of years, you notice how quickly we've given up our well, I haven't, but how other people have given up their sovereignty for their own healing, right? We've given up our capacity and our ability to, like, even the realization that you have an immune system. It's like no one is talking about our immune system over the last 3 years. Like, that's what we need to be working on, coming back, putting healing back in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, getting back on the right timeline. And the right timeline, my friends, is one where we're living in harmony with nature, and we're living in harmony with our body, mind, and spirit. And we're putting healing back in our hands and back in our hearts, you know, and back in ourselves. Right? And we're not looking outside for everything to fix us and make life better. We've got to do that for ourselves, because as long as we're waiting for something else to make us better, we're going to be waiting a long time. You know, it's literally the definition of insanity. Just saying, right? But in terms of wrapping it up and finishing it off, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please check out my level 1 workshop. If you've done it before, do it again. You'll get so much the second time round. I have people that do it multiple times, and every time is different. We also, for those who are interested in practitioner training, our next practitioner training will be coming up in January. It's also online, so you can take it from anywhere in the world. We do it on a Zoom class, and you can learn it from anywhere in the world. And it's great to see people learning it and bringing it back into their hands and doing healing for other people. It's I think that for me is like, I love doing healing, but there's something even beautiful when you see other people doing healing, when you see other people helping people. And I think in a world that, you know, we can complain about all the problems in the world, or we can do something about it. We can start by putting our health back in our hands, and we can help other people put their health in their hands. We can use our hands, our healing hands, to help each other, you know, and that's, we can give people a hand up, you know, not a hand out, but we can give them a hand up. We can help them step out of the fear and step back into love, step back to nature. You know, and sometimes we have to take a step out of life and saying, hey, this direction that I'm going in, if enough individuals don't step back, then collectively we're all moving into the same timeline, right? And so when enough individuals step back in their timeline and they say, hey, I want to come back to nature, I want to come back to health and well-being, when enough individuals do that, it affects the collective consciousness. Right? So it's not about trying to change the collective consciousness, it's about changing us. We are the collective consciousness. We got to change ourselves. We got to take responsibility for our health. And I feel like now more than ever, that's a must, right? Because, you know, there's always going to be fear mongering. Just listen to the news. You'll be depressed. If you're looking for depression, you don't have to go far. Watch the news. But, you know, it's like, if you're filling yourself up with that crap, then you've no one to blame, right? If you keep filling yourself up with all the bullshit and all the negativity in the world, then, you know, you can't expect to have a different result, you know. So, but somewhere in you, somewhere there's a spark that knows, and I'm not saying about that wants to believe. There's some place inside of you that knows that you're a fucking light being, you know. Pardon my French. I always curse when I speak the truth, you know. But there's a knowing in you that you're a full fractal light consciousness, light being, you know, and that's the part that I'm speaking to. Remember who you are. Come back to yourself, you know. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Thank you for tuning in. Over and out. Okay, I'm going to stop recording here.